Okay, so this is my evidence of preparation. I have my little buddy here in the back, so I apologize if he is talking. So, starting with the language-rich classroom, on page 1, I put an exclamation point talking about the dropout problem just because I realized that dropout is an issue across America, but I always thought it was more of a high school thing. And I guess it does happen more in high school, but I didn't realize it was so drastic. I'm talking on my video. Remember, we're gonna be quiet. Whisper for me. Okay. I didn't realize it was so drastic for ELLs. I didn't realize it says 60% had poor English skills of those who dropped out. So I just thought that was really surprising, but also sad. On the next page, on page 2, I underlined the part that says the process of creating an integrated language-rich environment is not likely to happen without informed and intentional planning on the part of the teacher. I put a thumbs up for that because I really like the idea of intentionality all around, whether it's in lesson planning or interactions with a student, anything like that. I just think that's really important, especially with ELLs, because there's going to be things that they're going to need specific help on, and I just think being intentional is just super important. My next one is on page 5. It was talking about how Mariana and Mitzi both had around the same level of conversational language, but when you look at their scores of tests and everything, one is like the highest and one is the lowest. And I put an exclamation point because I just thought it was really eye-opening, because you can have conversations with students in a class and have them participate in discussions, and then when it comes to assessment or just doing work, it can help you to identify like other issues they might be having that might not be evident through conversations. So I thought that was really helpful. My next one is when talking about the CHATS framework on page 8 at the top, it says the CHATS framework is based on best practices and incorporates sound methodology that has the potential to improve teaching and active learning wherever it is used. So I just put a heart there because I love the progression of using like evidence-based practices to encourage students and see the outcomes of it, of how effective it actually is. Because I feel like when I was a kid in school, a lot of times it was just by the book curriculum, and there weren't a lot of individualized, I guess, practices. So it's cool to see that there's like these evidence-based practices, that there's been data that we know it works, and they're being used more readily throughout elementary schools across the country. My next one is also on the same page. When it's talking about the diversity of ELL background at the bottom, when it brings up prior schooling for ELL. So say that you had like a student coming in and they're in 2nd grade and you need to know about their prior schooling. I put an exclamation point because I never really considered the background of the schooling, like before you interact with the child. I guess I never considered the formality of the schooling, if they had preschool to get them ready for kindergarten or anything like that. Even in just their native language, I never really considered how important that was, but now I really understand, and how it can impact just their learning of English and their progression through comprehension in school in general. And my next one is on page 11. It was with I think it was trans writing. It was just really cool to see how she was excited to write, that she understood the prompt, and even though it is in her native language, she understood what was being asked, and she wrote about it, and she wrote a lot. So it was cool to see that. Like, it made me feel good that she was excited to write about that. Let's see. My next one, we're moving into chapter 2 now. Page 21, I underlined in the, it looks like second paragraph, it says academic language is not usually learned outside the classroom setting. So I just put an exclamation point because I thought it's really our responsibility to facilitate that academic language within the classroom, because they're not, most children are not getting that teaching outside of school. So it's just super important that we're teaching that, or helping children to understand the difference, and yeah, just being the main facilitator in that in their lives. My next one is on page 23 at the top, when it's talking about the grant writing, when it adds the blahs in there. And I put a heart because it just made me really sad, just to see, like, this is what these ELLs are potentially reading. There's so many words within the paragraph that they just don't understand, and while that alone is frustrating, not being able to understand what you're reading, it's also discouraging because, like, they're not getting the full the full comprehension of the passage, and that can just lead to further confusion, discouragement, and all of that, and it's just really sad to see that. But it's great because we're going to be helping them. That's really cool, bud. That's awesome. You want to keep working? Yeah. Awesome. Show me when you're done, okay? My next one, whisper, remember. My next one was on page 25. I underlined helping students become aware of their need to deconstruct complex noun phrases as well as transform and paraphrase written text. I put the thought bubble because I think this is important for ELLs especially, because it's easy to get frustrated or distracted. So when even children who aren't ELLs, it's hard for them to understand what they're doing. Sorry, quiet, please. Thank you. Thank you for saying hi. It's really nice. It's frustrating to go through these concepts and learn them, especially when it's not in your native language. So it's important to go through and just like nitpick even at those little things so they understand what they're doing, they understand the parts of it, just so it doesn't seem like, oh, we're nitpicking at this because we want to make things so much more difficult. No, there's a reason to it, and it's really important to keep them from becoming distracted or frustrated or discouraged or anything like that. On the next page, 26, I said, I said for the family read-alouds, I think that's a great idea. I put a heart there. I said that this is a wonderful activity just for the families to bond, but also it can help the parents and other siblings develop their language as well, the English language, because a lot of times these English language students, their parents speak primarily their native language and hardly know any English. So it's hard for them to be teaching their children English when they don't even know it. So it's really cool. It's a great opportunity to just have them learn. Yes, it's a children's book or children's literature, but it is helpful and can help them to develop their language faster, especially since adults don't have that language acquisition device. So I just thought that was really cool as well. Fishy. My next one is on page 33. I said, this was in relation to listening to audiobooks. I said a thumbs up for this one because I really like this because I remember doing this myself in elementary school. So, sit please. I remember, I think first and second grade, we would have audiobooks to help us with our new unit projects. So with new vocabulary especially, it would just help us as we were reading along to put the words into context, especially with the inflection of the reader's voice, and just helping us to learn those concepts as well. Let's see. Okay, moving on to chapter 3. The bottom of...
You should stop.
I'm not done yet.
Please.
That looks really good, bud. The bottom of page 44, I underlined, as the pressure to perform well on standardized reading and math tests increases, the spotlight on the things that matter to many students becomes dimmer and dimmer. I put a thought bubble, and I guess it could also be a heart, because I think this is really sad. And this is where we see especially that children start to not like school earlier and earlier. Like you see, of course, in like middle school and high school when there's so many tests and content gets harder, it's just like kids start to just like, I don't want to say hate, but kids start to hate school. I know, I'm making a video, they're not here yet. Okay? Keep working, please. So I think that's just really discouraging, and I think like as teachers, this next generation of teachers, as we're learning to do this, it's gonna make it so these kids aren't so dreading going to school or not learning their favorite things. They're just being thrown into math and reading over and over so they can get these great scores so the school looks good. I just think that that's a little frustrating. Like, yes, these students need to know reading and math, but I think it's almost like rude to just force these students into these things without concern of what they're interested in or how they learn best or anything like that. So that just made me think about it a little bit and how I can impact that as a future teacher. And the next one, you're almost done. Awesome. And at the bottom of page 45, I just underlined relevant and authentic. In another class that I'm taking right now, we're talking about assessment, and we talk about authentic assessment and how important it is. And I just think like not only is authentic assessment important, but just like authentic teaching and learning experiences are super important to just keep the children engaged. And also like these experiences will be long lasting, and the kids will remember them, and they'll be beneficial to them in the real world. So I just think that's really important. On the next page, we have at the top of 47, I put a heart with the found poem, just because I love this idea. Not only is it helping the children to be creative, but they're also learning about... Awesome, bud. Keep going. Do some of the trees here. See what color they are. It encourages them to get into history, bringing fun activities into history, which is not always interesting for all students. So it's cool that they're learning aspects of poetry. They're not going to be master poets at this age, well, depending what age level it is, but they're learning the concepts and they're being introduced to it, which is super awesome, and it's fun for the students, so I think that's really awesome. And adding to that, for the I am poems, I put a heart because it makes me feel really great that we can incorporate emotion-based things in the learning for the students, which is not always the primary focus. Yes, we're always thinking about how the students feel and all of that, but for this, where it's having the students tap into their emotions, I think that's really important because they need to understand their emotions and how they feel, and sometimes it takes an activity like this to just unlock them, and I think that's really, really, really cool and really special. And it gives the teacher the opportunity as well to just learn some more things about their students. If there's a student who can't talk or doesn't like to talk as much, and they write this poem, and for the part where it says I worry or I cry, that's so awesome. What about these leaves down here? Want to do them? I think it's really important that they learn more about a student, because if they learn what they worry about, what they are happy about, what they dream about, they are able to connect more with the child. And good job. Do the dinosaur first. Do you know what kind of dinosaur that is?
Pale.
Nice. right, work on it. Show me when you're done. It's just really important to have that emotional, no, they're not here yet, that emotional connection with the student that you can find out throughout the work. So I think that one is really important too. Whisper, please. That's my pen. Thank you. Let's find my next one here. On page 56, for historical role play, I put a heart because I love the intentionality of giving these students different opportunities to learn. They're not sat down at a desk and she's with Jace, remember? At work. Okay, sit, please. I'm almost done, okay? Yeah, they're at work. Please keep going, okay? Yeah, so it's the intentionality of giving the students a different opportunity to learn while they are still learning the same content. They're not sat down at a desk with paper and just like, or listening to a teacher or reading a book. They're giving a chance to act, and you can put that into historical context. You could even add it into science, because I know that other part talked about how science isn't always tapped into, and a lot of students actually like science. Hi, are you being silly? Do you want to keep drawing? So yeah, I think that is just a great alternative to learning in this area.
Wow.
All right. Super cool, but oh, it's a blue one. All right, and then on to chapter 4.
Done.
All right, I put a heart. I put a heart at the bottom of 83, talking about Bloom's taxonomy and critical thinking. I put a heart and an exclamation point because I think it's super important to get these students to think critically rather than just being asked a question and answering in 1 or 2 words, or saying, what word is this? Great. It encourages them to really just tap into their mind and the content they're learning, and give deeper, higher order answers, and tap into higher order thinking. So, yeah, I think that part of critical thinking is just super important. Next, we have the middle of 86, and also 87, just this whole page, talking about properly channeled empathy. I put a heart with a sad face because it makes me feel kind of sad that we sometimes intentionally and unintentionally give the easier questions or lower order thinking questions to these ELLs just so they can get the right answer. And yeah, sure, it makes them feel good. You have to do that. So you make sure they have basic understanding, but to avoid the deeper questions for these students is not gonna help them grow anymore. So I just think that it was kind of sad. I said, I wrote, keep it the same or else they won't grow. And I meant just the same for everybody across the board, not just having different questions for, do you need help? Okay, continuation. So I just got done talking about keeping the curriculum the same for everyone, not just making it easier in a way, I guess, for ELLs. The next page, 88, I put a heart. It was kind of I guess it could have been a thought bubble as well. It was the part that, it was a quote from one of the teachers in the study, and it says, if I keep probing and probing, I can sense their frustration. I just put a little comment and said that I feel like that's an area that I might struggle with, like unintentionally, just like really wanting to see these ELLs succeed, but to the point where I unintentionally keep like asking and I just don't know, and they get more frustrated. So it kind of was like a feeling or a thought type thing where I was like, I wonder how I'm going to approach this in a real life situation, not just theoretically. And like relating to that on the next page on 87 or 89, I put a question mark and I said, are there ways to make open-ended questions more fun or easier for these ELLs? Because you want to encourage them to answer open-ended questions, but I know that they can be frustrating. So I guess just my question is just like, is there a way to make it easier, more fun, anything like that? And the next page, it has the graph of the ripple questioning. This one here. And I wrote, I put a thumbs up for this because I love this. I love the idea that there's different ways and different levels of understanding. And it's not always going to be the same for different subjects and different ideas. There's individual, small group, and whole group, like understanding, learning, absorbing, all of that. There's like different levels for that, and I just think that's so important because there's going to be students who learn better on their own, and sure, sometimes they'll have to do partner activities, but you have to know that and say, okay, they do better on their own. Or those who just need a little more encouragement and want to do small group or partners. It's just like really important to know that and to understand that there are different ways, and just because a student doesn't succeed in one way doesn't mean that they're intellectually behind or aren't really understanding. It's always just like a thought of how the student works, how their mind works, and how they're learning. And then I think I have one more for this chapter. Unless that was 5. I'm not sure. Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, okay. And now moving on to the other book, the total participation techniques. So starting in chapter 1, I had a comment right off the bat for the high cost of disengagement. I just put an exclamation point because it is so important to keep children engaged, not just the eager ones, because I remember in 3rd grade specifically, I was, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I was academically above most of the children who were in that class. And I was always eager to answer questions because I knew the answer and I loved to just get a right answer. And I remember one day my teacher would not call on me for any of the questions, and I got frustrated and I started to cry, and she pulled me aside and she talked to me and explained. She said, I know you're very smart, but we have to give other children an opportunity to answer these questions so they don't feel left out. And I guess I didn't really understand when I was a kid, but now looking back, I understand it. How there's going to be children who are excited. Maybe they don't get it, but they're excited and they just want to answer questions, which is great. And we have to include everybody. But it comes to a point where I think it says there's children who try to fly beneath the radar. And I just think it's going to be super important to just catch that and see if there's ways that, without pushing them, that you can get them engaged and keep them just focused on the activity at hand. On the next page, for listening objects, this part, I had never heard it before, and it was like eye-opening, but it also kind of broke my heart a little bit, where it was saying, describe students as listening objects, just like listening to the teachers all the time. And it kind of hurt my heart a little bit, because I'm like, I remember being there, and I remember just getting to a point where I was just so bored with school, and school started to lose its importance in my life. And I think it's sad to read, but it's also an encouragement and a driving force for me as a future educator, just that my goal is going to be to make it so no student feels like a listening object. Especially it's going to be hard for me with the ELL students, just because a lot of times if they feel like shy or they're afraid of getting a wrong answer, I don't want them to just sit there and just be absorbing all day. I want them to be able to talk about what they're learning, talk about what they don't understand. So I think that's going to be really encouraging for me in the near future. And then on the next page related to that, I had a question. I put a question mark for around boredom and engagement. I said, how do we engage those who fly under the radar without pushing them and making them uncomfortable? I'm still not sure exactly how to go about that, and I know that each student's different, but I guess it's just like how, like in the other book, how it talked about probing and probing. How do we keep them engaged? How do we have them answer questions without pushing them over the ledge where they're just like, I'm done, I do not want to be involved in this anymore. So that's just something that I'll be looking for answers to as we move through. And then at the next page, bottom of page 6, I really love this part. It was a whole paragraph section about making a difference, and the last sentence just says, one teacher can make such a difference. And I put a heart because this was one of my main influencers when I decided this major, because I was looking at my moral values and all of that, because I was undecided about what I wanted to be. And I just thought that it's so important for the next generation to just be different, because you see, like even through a familial aspect, just how it always seems like parents want to do better for their kids than they had. And it's the same, almost the same idea, where it's like you see over the time, over the generations, how things have been different, how things have been maybe worse, and you just want to make that difference. Not only just like with that, but you want to be, we as teachers, we want to be, we want to build up world changers. Yes, we're world changers because we're influencing the next generation, but we want to build up world changers as well, which is like something that's really high up there on my my personal teaching theory, where I just, that's just super important to me. So I love that whole section there. And then my last one for chapter 1 was I think it was an excerpt. Let me check real quick. Yeah, it's just this little passage that says, you really have to be intentional in the beginning of the year because many students are used to traditional classrooms where they sit in rows. And there was this whole rest of the discussion. But I put an exclamation point because I said it's important to set classroom expectations early. It doesn't have to be like hard set rules where the kids are like, oh my gosh, she has all these rules and this is gonna be terrible, but just like letting the children know what you expect from them. Whether they're unspokens or they are spoken, just letting them know that this is what you're gonna do and this is what you expect them to do, especially early, because not everyone teaches the same. And you don't want to get to a point where you are frustrated with the students because they're not doing something, but then you realize you never set that expectation. So it's important to set that early, so that you don't run into those issues. And then moving on to chapter 2, right on the first page, it was talking about higher order thinking. So it has the first question, define human rights, and it talks about how that might be easy. You might have to dig a little bit, but it's an easier question to answer than the following. How has your perception of human rights been affected by your culture and your country's history? Now, obviously, that's not like a second grader question. I don't know, maybe it is if you word it with less complex wording, but it just encourages you to think deeper. And I put a thought bubble there because I said, I think while this may be challenging for students, it could be the one thing that will expand their thinking, which is like especially harder. It's going to be especially harder for ELLs, but it could be one of those catalyst moments where it's like, oh my word, they just gave me all this information, or they actually do know all this and they just needed to be pushed. So of course, there's going to be a middle ground, and every student's going to be different. But I think while it's challenging and all of that, it's going to be beneficial for every student, especially ELLs. On the next page, it also talks about being cognitively engaged, which I think was like something that I considered but never really thought about too much. That's okay, buddy. Come give me a hug. You know I love you. I love you.
But my other book, I can't see it.
I'll help you find it in a minute, okay? I'm almost done my video, okay? Being cognitively engaged. So the students could be paying attention, looking at you, doing the worksheets, whatever the assignment is. But if they're not cognitively engaged, they're really not absorbing any of the information. So it was something that I guess I knew in the back of my head, but never really considered physically engaged and cognitively engaged as being separate. I kind of just thought like being engaged in general was just the same thing. My third one for chapter 2 is at the bottom of page 14. It says, due to unequal access to quality learning experiences for students trapped in the classrooms with fewer learning opportunities. Just talking about how,
Can you get my words, please?
sure, talking about how in classrooms and schools, there you go, that have, that don't have, I guess, better materials, or they can't go on certain field trips or something like that. Any like inequality within the schools just because of funding or experiences. And it's just like kind of, I put a heart with a sad face because this inequality just in this specific setting is just kind of sad, because it's like the students who fall behind because of this, it's almost backwards thinking, because you're like with the funding that gets taken away too because their scores are lower, it's just like they need these extra things to be better, and then what happens really is they just get things taken away from them, which is just like backwards to me, and it's sad. But I think that if every school and every class has the same experiences and same opportunities, it can really just encourage and help the students grow in the way that they deserve to. Next page, 17, the little excerpt, it says, it's been neat to see because the students in learning support will usually wait for the other kinds to talk. Braxton, whisper, please. We'll usually wait for all the students and other kids to talk. And through using TPTs, I can see what they're thinking through their quick writes, and just know that they have a thought through thumbs up when ready. So I just thought that like seeing that excerpt from a teacher who actually implemented these TPTs,
I got 7.
that's awesome, bud. It's just encouraging to read, because obviously we're learning these and we are taking the author's words for, we're just taking it into consideration and say, oh yeah, this is gonna work. But it's encouraging just to read the little excerpt from teachers who actually are implementing them, and just to see that they've worked and there's a positive impact.
Okay, don't these ones.
And then my last one is on page 19. Says, ensuring higher order thinking also builds academic confidence. I put a heart because this is just a huge goal as teachers, especially for ELL students, because you want them to understand what they're doing. Obviously, you want them to understand what we're learning, the process, and the end goal, like why we're learning it. But it's super important that they become confident in themselves. They don't want to. You don't want them to just go through school and go through the motions. You want them to be confident. You want them to get to a point where they can almost be independent, because they're so confident. And I just think it's like really encouraging, because you want them to feel good about themselves. You want them to feel about themselves how you feel about them. So I just think that's also a really important concept. So I think that was all of them. I believe that's 30. Thank you, and thanks for watching.